climate deniers from blocking the way to our mission. So we cannot afford to give a Republican-led House or Senate, funded by dirty fuels, any chance to undo everything that we have gained this past year. Our communities can't wait. My community in Puerto Rico, affected by Hurricane Maria, cannot wait. Wisconsin, with all the floods and the droughts that hurts crop and infrastructure, these Great Lakes, are heating up, and wildlife is under threat. So this community can wait. Our future can't wait, right? We know time's up, and I won't wait any longer. Can you wait any longer? No, right? Young people, and especially young people of color will be hit hardest by the impacts of climate change. Climate disaster is already in our doorstep, and it is imperative that, to transition to 100% clean energy before it's too late. So, I want you to look again at the person beside you, and repeat after me. Thanks for being here. Thanks for having my back. I promise to bring one more person to vote. We are stronger together. I'm ready. I'm fired up. Let's win this election. Okay, let's bring it home. So thanks a lot, Wisconsin. Thanks to Next Gen. Thanks to Move On, to Bernie. And so see you on Tuesday, okay? Thanks a lot.
How's everybody doing? Are we ready to soon hear from Bernie Sanders? So my name is Cristina Sensun Ramirez, and I'm the president of Next Gen America, the country's largest youth vote organization. And last election, we helped mobilize 1 in 9 young people across the country that led to the largest youth voter turnout in American history. Raise your hand if you were one of those voters that helped send Donald Trump packing. We know the power, the transformative power that young voters can have as the largest, the most diverse, and the most progressive voting bloc in this country. And that despite what MAGA Republicans may say, what's best about our country, this country, is our diversity. And I know this too because I live this. My mom is the oldest of 9 kids from a poor farm-working family in southern Mexico. And my dad's a white American hippie that was living on a commune when he met her in Mexico in the 70s. And my white grandpa even used to say that me and my siblings were purebred Irish Mexican Americans, if you'd ever not seen one. And as a kid, I knew there was nothing purebred about my background, but I got to see and learn something that a lot of other people don't. That it doesn't matter where you come from, the color of your skin, who you love, or how you pray. That we all just want the same things. We all just want to be safe, to be healthy, to be respected for who we are, and go to great schools and have good jobs and have time off from them to be with our loved ones and do what we love. And when Bernie Sanders ran in 2016, he taught our entire country that wanting those basic things wasn't asking too much. That in fact, it was asking for what every single family in person could have in the richest country in the world. Because while some Republicans seem to only believe in the power of the ultra-wealthy and the well-connected, we believe in the power of us. And we know it's not asking too much to not only judge our economy by how well big corporations are doing, but to judge our economy by how well ordinary people are doing. And we know it isn't asking too much that every single American be able to go to the doctor when they are sick and have the highest quality health care when they need it. And we sure as hell know it isn't asking too much to leave it up to women to decide when we are ready to make a family instead of politicians. And we know it isn't asking too much to transition our economy off of fossil fuels that are literally killing us, to clean energy that will leave a healthy planet for each and every one of us and every single future generation. And that's why young people are turning out in record numbers, because we know we are at a fork in the road in our country. One that veers towards fascism and authoritarian rule, or one where the people rule. And we at Next Gen, we don't put our hope in any single one politician or party. We put our hope in America's young people. Because every time our country has made a great leap forward, it took the courage, the imagination, and the impatience of young people pushing to make it so. So the highest youth voter turnout in 2020 didn't just help kick Donald Trump out of office. It helped build a vision for our country that is more fair and more just, that is building a government that is more representative of all of us. Because the highest youth voter turnout got us historic gun safety legislation when politicians said it couldn't get done. It got us student debt relief. It got us the largest single investment by any country on the planet to tackle climate change. And it got us long overdue marijuana reform, and we're going to make sure it's legalized everywhere in this country, aren't we? That is the power of the youth vote. And so I don't know about you all, but I don't think we're finished yet with what we want on our agenda, are we? We got a lot more shit we want to get done. And that's why we're all going to turn out and vote and get every single person we know and love to get out and vote. And if you haven't voted already, you're going to be able to go to the merchandise table right after this. And there are going to be buses and cars, transportation to take you to go vote today. Who's going to vote that hasn't voted today? Get it done today, okay? And take a friend, take your mama, take whoever you want. But we also know that we are facing pretty incredible odds, that in spite of what happens here in Wisconsin with your crazy gerrymandering, and that politician after politician in every state is trying to make it harder for us to vote because they know how damn powerful our vote is. But we have to remember to not give up and become cynical, because that's how they win. And I live in the state, I come from Texas. It's the state that makes it hardest to vote in the entire country. So last legislative session, when legislators were putting forth more bills to make it harder, we wanted to let the millions of young people know in our state the power that they have. So Beto O'Rourke, when he ran against Ted Cruz, he lost by just 220,000 votes. You know how many young people of color turn 18 every year in Texas? 270,000. So when they put that bill forward, we decided we wanted to send a message to those millions of young people of color in our state and to those legislators. So we snuck in 36 activists and organizers, young people with backpacks filled with 270,000 different colored rose petals to symbolize how many of us there were. And we snuck them up into the Texas Rotunda, and we all took position, and we waited for the signal to throw them out, because we didn't ask for permission, of course. And we waited until this 19-year-old singer in a hot pink power suit with roses all in her hair came and stood in the middle of the Texas Rotunda, got in place, and looked up at us and started to sing as powerfully and loudly as she could, Amazing Grace. And then we let all of those roses fall down. And I'll tell you, for all of us that were there, I cried, because it was so beautiful, because we could feel in that moment the power, the history of that moment, of those that came before us and died for our right to vote, and those that would come after us. And that day, we sent a message to those legislators that we have the numbers and power to win, and ultimately we will. And along the way, we will fight your darkness with our light, your ugliness with our beauty. And if you try and cut a rose bush down, guess what? It'll grow back. So let's send a message to every single politician in this country, in this state that is trying to take our country backwards, that if they want to cling to the past, they can have it. But the future, nah, that belongs to all of us. Who's ready to hear from the most popular politician with young voters in the entire state? the man that built a movement of ordinary people and young people to believe in government and democracy again. Give it up for Senator Bernie Sanders.
Eau Claire, thank you. My staff was wondering whether anyone would come out. Well, you did. Thank you. And let me thank Christina for her remarks and her introduction, and let me thank all of the musicians and everybody else who spoke here today. Let me tell you a little bit about myself, because probably not everybody in Eau Claire, Wisconsin knows me. So I was born in a small town called Brooklyn, New York. And I was raised in a 3.5-room rent-controlled apartment in Brooklyn, because my family did not have a lot of money. And growing up in a family without a lot of money, and seeing the stresses that it put on my parents and the arguments that took place really had a major impact on my political views. So I didn't know much about politics when I was a kid, nothing at all, but I did know that lack of money and economic stress just impacts people in awful, awful ways. I moved to Vermont in the early 60s, and without giving you a long story here, was elected mayor of Burlington, Vermont in 1981. Now, Burlington is, by national standards, a small city. It's only 40,000. It's the largest city in Vermont. And I won that election by 10 votes. And that was after a recount. So I learned at an early age that every vote, in fact, counts. And the other thing that I want to tell you is I ran then as an independent. I spent, I think, 16 years in the House as an independent and 14 or so years in the Senate as the longest-serving independent in the history of the United States Congress. And I say that to you because I want to underline this point. I'm not here to tell you that the Democratic Party is doing all of the right things, that they are doing what they should be doing to address the crises facing working families. They're not. But what I am here to tell you is that we need fundamental reform of the Democratic Party, and you have got to be part of that. And what I am here to tell you is that this is the most consequential election, midterm election, in my lifetime and in your lifetime. And to a very large degree, the future of this country, believe it or not, will result from what happens in this midterm election. And I am here to tell you that the choices are quite clear, that while the Democrats are not doing everything I would like them to do, trust me, they are 1,000,000 times better than what the Republicans would bring you. And I very much hope that from the top of the ticket, Mandela Barnes on down, you will vote Democratic. You know, Christina was mentioning this, and I want to say a word about young people and voting. And I was thinking as we were flying in this morning from Burlington, I was thinking, how did I feel when I was 19 or 20 about midterm elections? I got to be honest with you, I was not thinking a whole lot about midterm elections, and I suspect I did not vote. Don't tell anybody that, but that's the truth. But here is what is the good news, and Christina made this point, is that in recent years, in 2018 and 2020, we have seen a significant uptake, increase in young people voting. And I think it is fair to say, some may disagree with me, but I think it is fair to say that Joe Biden would not be president today if it was not the large numbers of young people voting. Now, that is the good news. Let me give you the not-so-good news from an article that appeared in the New York Times just yesterday. And that is, they said, in Florida, fewer than 5% of voters from ages 18 to 29 have cast ballots up to this point, 5%. In the 6 other states, battleground states, that include age ranges in their voting data, voters aged 18 to 25 make up just 4.3% of the overall early ballot totals. By comparison, voters over 40 make up more than 86% of the total early vote. Now, I want to see everybody vote. I want to see older people vote. I want to see middle-aged people vote. But the future of this country rests with young people. And your lives, by definition, because you're young, are going to be more impacted by this election and coming elections than any other age group. So I am here to beg of you, for your own sakes, not for me, but for your own sakes, to see that young people get a fair shot at the future and that you come out in voting in numbers that are representative of your position in the population. All right? Now, the truth is, and I'm very proud of this, and you should be as well, that young people today are the most progressive generation in the history of this country. That's what you are. You guys have been leaders in the fight against racism. You have been leaders in the fight against sexism, against homophobia. And if we're making any progress at all, and it is certainly not enough, in the struggle against climate change, young people in this country and around the world have been leading that effort. So I thank you very much. But part of that struggle, whether it's for women's rights or the environment or whatever it may be, has got to be participating in the political process. You can't go out and say, I'm really nervous about the environment and climate, I'm really nervous about racism in America, but I'm not going to vote. That's not acceptable. Part of what you've got to be doing is being engaged in the political process and voting. And I would say to you all, think about this for a moment, that I hope every one of you will be voting, but if you bring out 2 or 3 friends, you've doubled or tripled your political impact. So when you see some of your friends saying, well, it's all crap, it's all bullshit, I don't want to come out and vote, remind them of all of the significant issues facing this country, and I want to talk about them right now. It's not good enough to moan and groan and complain. All right, you got to try to do something about it. Voting is not the end all, but it is one very, very important way that you can have an impact. And let me just say a little bit about what this particular midterm election is about. And again, in my view, it is the most consequential, important midterm election in the modern history of this country. And I know that many people, well, what's a midterm election? I don't even know who my congressperson is. And, no one's running for president. What's the big deal? And the media is, when you run for president, I can tell you about this, then the media will focus on this or Trump or anybody else, and, everybody gets engaged. Not so much in a midterm. But let me tell you why this midterm is so important, and for many other reasons. It determines which political party will control the House and the Senate. And right now, I'm in the Senate, of course, we have 50 people in the Democratic caucus, of which I'm one, 50 people in the Republican caucus. Democrats control the Senate because Biden is president and Vice President Harris cast the deciding vote. So that gives us 51 votes. If we were to lose 2 seats, 1 seat, what am I saying? 1 seat. It would be 51-49. They would control the Senate. And I want to talk to you in a minute about what that means. So what are the issues that we're looking at right now? Let me just start off with one that I know you're familiar with. A number of months ago, the Supreme Court, in just an unbelievably stupid decision, decided to overturn Roe v. Wade. And in that decision, in the year 2022, what they said is that women in America, in this day and age, this is not 1922, it's not 1822, they said that women are too stupid to be able to control their own bodies and make decisions to them of enormous importance. And virtually all, not all, but virtually all of Republicans agree with that decision. And I'm proud to tell you that virtually the entire Democratic caucus holds what is not a very radical idea, and that it is women and not the government who should control their own bodies. And by the way, I don't think I have to say this too loudly, but you all know how babies are made. And men have got to stand with women on this issue. This is not a woman's issue, it's an issue of all of us. And another issue, and all of these issues are of monumental importance. I don't know what I can say that you don't know about the issue of climate. And that is to tell you that the scientists, the people who have studied this issue for decades, consider this to be an existential threat to you, to this country, and to the entire planet, okay? What we are fighting for, and I do not exaggerate, is whether you, your kids, and your grandchildren will be able to live in a planet that is healthy and is habitable. Not just an American issue, Chinese issue, European issue, Latin American issue. Now, you all know that in the past 8 years, we have seen the hottest years ever recorded. You all know that in the western part of the United States, they are experiencing the worst drought in 1,200 years. You all know about the historic rainfall and devastating floods that took place in city after city in America just this last summer. You know that historically hot weather in London and China this summer literally melted bridges, airplane runways, and rooftops. If we do not get a handle on climate change, there will be more drought, and for some of you who come from farming families, it will be hard for your families to grow the crops that they have historically grown. The quality will be less, quantity will be less. There will be more floods, more extreme weather disturbances, causing government to spend tens and tens and tens of billions of dollars repairing the damage. There will be more mass migrations all over the world, because people in poor countries who are now trying to eke out a living by farming are going to find that they can't grow crops on their land, no drinking water as well. And they're going to move to other cities, causing all kinds of additional problems. So from a national security point of view, war and peace issue, climate change is a huge issue. And the sad thing about it is, I wish I could tell you, well, we want the American government to do the right thing. Even if tomorrow we did all the things that had to be done for this country, it still wouldn't be enough, because we need international cooperation from China, who are now the major carbon emitter in the world, from Russia, who have now invaded Ukraine in a terrible war, from Europe, from all over the world. So this is a huge issue. And I can tell you that while we have not done enough in Congress, We did just pass a bill for $300 billion helping us to move to sustainable energy and energy efficiency. Not enough, but a start. And I can tell you that we did not get one Republican vote. And during this campaign, when you listen to the Republicans, you got a bunch of them who still don't even acknowledge the reality of climate change, let alone coming up with a plan of what to do. And that is so irresponsible to you and your generation. And then you got another issue out there. And all of these issues, I can't prioritize them. Just like, you know, what can I say about the future of the planet, women's rights? These are enormous issues. But here's another issue. Right now, we are seeing an unprecedented attack on democracy in the United States by Donald Trump and his extreme right-wing allies. Let me tell you something that's simple and true. Donald Trump lost the election. And you know, in a democracy, you lose elections occasionally. You know, I will not forget in 1988, I was running for Congress. God, did I work hard in that race in Vermont. We had one seat. Ran all over the state, worked 20 hours a day. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, they announced that my Republican opponent had defeated me. I was disappointed. But I didn't go around the next day and said, vote a fraud. Because the only way somebody as wonderful and as great as me could possibly lose an election is if it was fraud. You know, that is such a nonsensical argument. And you see Trump and others saying, the only way we can lose an election is fraud. Think about what that means. That is undermining the very foundations of American democracy. And it saddens me to think there are so many people out there who believe that stuff. And all I can tell you is that too many incredibly brave men and women put their lives on the line to defend American democracy, to understand that what made our country different than many other countries, especially way back then, is we had the radical idea that ordinary people should make the decisions. I want to tell you is I wish I could tell you that the only problem with American democracy was Donald Trump, but that's not the case. What we are seeing right now is the creation of an extremely corrupt political system in which multi-billionaires are buying elections. All right, so when you turn on TV, I don't know how much you know about this, but let me just give you some examples. In 2010, 12 years ago, billionaires spent $31 million on elections through super PACs or whatever. In 2020, as a result of the disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision, they spent $1.2 billion. In this election, the guess is that they'll probably spend $2 billion in super PACs and stuff. Now, what does that mean? It means that when you turn on television, you'll see an ad attacking Mandela or somebody else, and it's paid by some group that you never heard of. What that group is likely is a super PAC funded by billionaires who can put as much money as they want into that super PAC. So if you're sitting around with $10 billion, putting $100 million into an election is not a lot of money. You do it, and they are doing it. And all over this country, that is what we're seeing. Do Democrats use super PACs? Yes. Are Republican super PACs greatly outspending Democrats? Yes. The answer to that is that we've got to end this corrupt political system. Democracy is one person, one vote. And I want to say this to you. I hope, depending, each of you has your own strengths and weaknesses, but I hope that if some of you are thinking of running for political office, whether it's school board or president of the United States, or whatever it may be, I'd like you to do it, but I don't want you to have to spend half of your life begging money from wealthy people to run for office. That's not what democracy is about. And what that means, and you all know, why would billionaires be spending all this money? I'll tell you, on Sunday, I'm going to be in Pittsburgh. The young lady named Summer Lee, who's a very strong candidate, fighting for working class people. And a billionaire super PAC, corporate-funded super PAC, is trying to defeat Summer. What is her crime? Why does she deserve to be defeated? Because she stands up for working people, for young people, for people of color. And we're seeing that all over this country. And what we have got to do, and we need your help to make this happen, we got to overturn this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision. And we have got to move toward public funding of elections. So this campaign is about all of those things, but it's about even more. It's about an economy. So let me say a word about what's going on economically in this country. For all of you in this room who are billionaires, you're doing just great. In fact, if you are in the top 1% of America today, you are doing better than any top 1% in the history of the United States of America. Today, now I know you don't see this too much on corporate TV or in the newspapers. Very few people talk about it in Congress. A lot of them get their money from these folks. But let me just tell you about what's going on in the economy. Today in America, we have more income and wealth inequality than any time in the history of our country. You all know what income and wealth inequality means. Here's what it means. Today, if you can believe it, and this is true, 3 people, 1, 2, 3, now own more wealth than the bottom half of American society. It's 165 million here, 3 people over there. That's America today, and that gap is growing wider. Today, the top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 92%. Today, at a time when 60% of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. Do you all know what that means, living paycheck to check? Raise your hand if you know what that means. All right, you probably do. And my family live paycheck to paycheck. And what that means is, mom and dad go out to work, you guys go out to work, and at the end of the day, you got nothing to put in the bank, maybe you're even a little further behind. That's living paycheck to paycheck. And living paycheck to paycheck, this is what my family experienced, causes enormous anxiety. If you're a mom out there and you don't have decent health care, you're worried about your kid getting sick. If you're an older worker and you haven't saved anything for retirement, you're saying, what's going to happen to me when I retire? Can I make it on Social Security? So enormous anxiety that is out there. During this pandemic, which has caused so much pain in our country, we have lost, in this country alone, over 1 million people. Millions more obviously became sick. Altogether aware what long COVID means, the implications of that. But during this pandemic, tens and tens of thousands of American workers, so-called essential workers, had to go to work. They didn't have a choice. They worked in hospitals because that was their job. That was their calling. Do you know how many nurses have died as a result of the pandemic? Over 5,000 nurses have died. People who work in meatpacking plants died. People that worked in public transportation died. Firemen died. Cops died. Teachers died. People who went out and did their job got exposed to the virus, and way back then when we didn't have decent treatment, we didn't have good vaccines, people died. And while tens and tens of thousands of people went to work, died keeping the economy going so that we had the food and the public services that we need, the billionaire class saw a $2 trillion increase in their wealth. And yet all these top executives, they weren't going to meat packing plants. They weren't out on the street. They weren't in hospitals. They were sitting in their offices or in their homes, fancy homes, with their computers. And I make that point to talk about the economic inequality that exists now. Billionaires become much richer. In the pandemic, working people died. And because of inflation, working people are falling today further and further behind. What's going on in the economy today is that everything being equal, unless we change it, your generation will have a lower standard of living than your parents. Right now, after almost 50 years, going back 50 years, the average American worker is earning less in inflation adjusted for dollars than he or she did 50 years ago. Can you believe that? Think about it. Think about when I was mayor of Burlington in 1981, we didn't have a computer in the building. We didn't have a printer. There was no email. Hard to believe. Workers have become far more productive, and yet they're earning in real inflation adjusted for dollars less than they earned 50 years ago. Today in America, we have almost 600,000 people who are homeless. We got 85 million people who are either uninsured or lack adequate health insurance. We got hundreds of thousands of bright young people who would like to go to college but can't afford to do that. And we got 45 million people who are dealing with student debt. So what is going on right now is, to be honest with you, there is class warfare going on. You know what I mean by that? And unfortunately, the wrong side is winning that war. And what our job is to take on the greed, and it's incredible greed. I don't know, honestly don't know. Scratch my head about it. Everybody wants that money, I got it. We all want to live economically secure lives, got that. I do, you do. But I don't know why somebody who has $100 billion thinks they have to buy and sell politicians in order to get even more tax breaks than they already have. That's greed. Now, not too many people talk about that issue. All right, and you understand why. You have billionaires who own much of the major media, billionaires who have enormous control over the economic and political life of this country, and not too many people are going to come forward and say, stop the greed. And let us create an economy that works for all of us, not just the few. Now, my Republican colleagues are running around the country in this campaign, and they're saying, vote Republican because inflation is 8.2%, and it's all Joe Biden's fault, or Bernie Sanders' fault, or Democrats' fault. So let's take a look at the truth of that issue. Right now, in Great Britain, United Kingdom, inflation is over 10%. In Germany, it's 11.6%. In Ireland, it's 9.6%. In the European Union, inflation is about 11%. In all of those countries, more than it is in the United States. So what is the cause of inflation? Is it Joe Biden's fault? Is it Bernie Sanders' fault? I don't think so. I don't think so. And what the economists will tell us is inflation is caused by a number of factors. Number one, as a result of the pandemic all over the world, people were unable to go to work, and we have a breakdown in international supply chains. Companies are not getting the products on time as they used to. That's number one. Number two, the terrible, horrific war in Ukraine created by Russia has also caused severe economic impacts. But the third reason that is not talked about very much, not by Republicans, not by enough people, is that the major cause of inflation today, 8.2%, is corporate greed. Right now, while people are paying more and more for gas at the pump, more and more for food, for prescription drugs, for housing, corporate profits are at a record-breaking level. Now, if you want to know why, I don't know what gas is here in Vermont today, it's close to $4 a gallon. The West Coast, it's higher than that. But if you're paying $4 or $5 or $6 for a gallon of gas, you should know that the big 5 oil companies made $59 billion in profits during the second quarter, 3-month period of this year alone. $59 billion. Want to know why you're paying high gas prices? ExxonMobil's profits are up 280%. Chevron's profits are up 277%. ConocoPhillips up 146%. All right. In other words, what the oil companies said to themselves is they said, look, there's all this confusion in the world. You got a pandemic. You got a war in Ukraine. You got a breakdown in supply chains. Nobody will know. Nobody will blame us. We can raise prices sky high and we can get away with it. To my mind, that is totally outrageous. And it's not just the oil companies. The major food companies, record-breaking profits. Major drug companies, record-breaking profits. And that is why I believe that in the midst of all of this, we need a windfall profits tax to tell these people to stop ripping off the American people. And I want you to think about this. I know we don't inject issues of morality too much in politics. They don't go in the same sentence, I guess. But think about it from a moral point of view. All right? Everybody knows what's going on. Everybody knows the anxiety, the pain of the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, climate change, the impact on the economy. You could have had a corporate America saying, hey, in the midst of all of this stuff, we got to do the right thing. We got to help working families. We got to make gas prices at the pump as affordable as possible. God, prescription drugs as affordable as possible. Housing as affordable as possible. But they did exactly the opposite. I know that all of you know that addiction in America, whether it's drug addiction, alcohol, cigarettes, food, whatever it may be, is a very serious problem in our country. But these guys suffer from a very, very terrible addiction. They are addicted to greed, and we've got to help them end that addiction. I want to say another word. When the Republicans blame Biden or me or anybody else for inflation, one of the points they made is big government spending on the part of the Democrats. Well, in a sense, they have a point. We passed in March of 21 the American Rescue Plan, and as chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, I played a very important role in helping to write that bill and getting it passed. I want you all to think, and apparently in America we have short memories problem. I want you to go back almost 2 years ago, March 21. The United States was experiencing the worst pandemic, beginning of the worst pandemic in the modern history of this country. 3,000 people a day were dying. 3,000 people a day were dying. Hospitals were being filled up with COVID patients. Doctors and nurses, you remember, they didn't even have the basic protection that they needed. They were doing their jobs and getting sick. We didn't have the masks and the gowns and the gloves that they needed. 3,000 people a day were dying. The economy at that point was suffering, as a result of the pandemic, the worst economic collapse since the Great Depression. Some 24 million people as a result of the pandemic were unemployed, underemployed, or had given up looking for work. Nobody wanted to go to work for good reason. They didn't want to get sick. Tremendous confusion. So you had a terrible public health crisis, and you had a major, major economic crisis. I will never forget, it really shook me up, that in my own city, Burlington, Vermont, half a mile away from where I live, there was a line of cars stretched for God knows how long, for people who never before in their lives had to do it, were lining up for emergency food shipments distributed by the National Guard. That was going on all over this country. Hunger was at a level higher than at any time in the modern history of this country. And Congress looked out, the president looked out, and they saw the pain. And you know what? This is what we did. We said to every working class person, family in this country, we know that you are nervous, we know you're scared. We are going to make sure each of you, man, woman, and child, gets a check for $1,400. And I do not apologize for that. When millions of workers were losing their jobs, we said we're going to extend and increase unemployment benefits. I don't apologize for that. When working class parents were finding it increasingly hard to provide for their kids, we provided a $300 a month child tax credit for those parents. No apologies. When hospitals, some of the hospitals in America, were on the verge of collapse, their doctors, nurses were becoming sick. More and more people were coming in. They didn't have the number of ICU beds they needed. We put billions of dollars to make sure that hospitals survived during that crisis. No apologies. We provided massive help to small businesses who all over this country, in Wisconsin, in Vermont, going out of business. People were not coming in. We kept them afloat with massive help. No apologies for helping small business. And we helped colleges and universities all over this country who were experiencing financial strain. I just talked to a gentleman right here at your college. He told me that as a result of the American Rescue Plan, $10 million came into this small college to help 3,000 students. All right. So Republican, and by the way, to do all of that and much more, to do all of that, to help us during the terrible pandemic, to help us during the economic collapse, we spent money. We could not get one Republican vote to stand up for working families during that process. Well, let me tell you what Republicans would do. They object to the fact that we spent $1.9 trillion. Let me tell you what they have in mind. In the midst of all of the income and wealth inequality that is going on right now, Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Republicans in the Senate, and others, Chuck Grassley of Iowa, very active in this, Ron Johnson, many of them. You've heard of Senator Johnson. They have a brilliant idea. Want to hear their brilliant idea? Their brilliant idea is that we should repeal the estate tax. The estate tax, of which nobody in America has heard of, is a tax which applies to the top 1/10 of 1%. 99.9% of Americans, nobody in this room, would be impacted by the repeal of that tax. But what it would manage to do is increase the national debt by giving a $1.75 trillion tax breaks to billionaires. That's true. 1.75. So they objected to the fact that we spent $1.9 trillion to help working families and kids and hospitals and students, and they want to give $1.75 trillion to billionaires under that proposal, if it were passed. And these guys are going to work hard on that. It would mean that Elon Musk's family would receive a tax break of up to $83 billion. Now, I have nothing against Elon Musk's kids and family and all that stuff, but no family in America, in the midst of what we are going through, deserves an $83 billion tax break. Not just Musk, it's all of the billionaires out there. Now, in order to pay for their tax break, they have another brilliant idea, and that is they want to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. That's Ron Johnson, and it's the whole bunch of them. So you got seniors, half of the seniors in this country trying to get by on $25,000 or less. Are seniors struggling, friends? Yeah. All right. And what would it mean to cut Social Security? I'll give you one example. The average senior, if my memory is correct, received about $140 increase every month in Social Security. Is that right? Because inflation is high. And what we have now is a law that says inflation goes up, seniors get more. Inflation goes down, you would get less. That's it. It's a good law. These guys want to play with that law. They want to raise the retirement age. You know, people are struggling right now. They want to make it higher. And this is not just rhetoric. This is reality. What you have right now are hundreds of members of the House, Republicans, who have made it clear this is what they want to do. What this campaign is about is not just Republicans, not just Democrats. It is maybe more important, especially for younger people, about where this country should be going in the future. And I know in the midst of the 30-second ads and everything else that's going on, and all of the acrimony that's going on, sometimes we don't have the time to think about it, but it's important that we do. And that is that we have got to determine, not billionaire campaign contributors, not politicians, we have got to determine where we want this country to go in the future. And here is the good news. You know, everybody says, with some truth, that we are a divided nation. And I do not have to tell you that on the issue of women's rights or guns or whatever, the rights of the gay community, etc. There are divisions in this country. But the truth is, and when you talk about economic issues, whether you're Republican, Independent, or Democrat, there is pretty wide consensus of where we should be going as a nation. So let me tell you some of where the American people, it's not just my ideas, but where the American people want to go. Number one, almost everybody believes, now Ron Johnson doesn't, but almost everybody else believes, that if you work 40 hours a week, you should not be living in poverty. Does anybody here know what the minimum wage in Wisconsin is? What is it? Wow. All right. All right, $7.25. Well, what most Americans know is that we have got to raise the federal minimum wage to a living wage. And that is over $15 an hour. It is not, and by the way, you know, people will say, oh, Bernie Sanders, he's extreme. I'll tell you what's extreme. What's extreme is giving tax breaks to billionaires and forcing people to work for $9 or $10 an hour. That's extreme. What the American people believe, what I strongly believe, is that we're not going to grow the middle class in this country until we grow the trade union movement. And I'm very proud that all over this country, workers are beginning to stand up, trying to form unions, negotiate decent contracts for decent wages, benefits, and working conditions. We're seeing more of an increase in union organizing that we have seen in decades, and that is a good thing. And what we have got to do in Congress is make it easier for workers to form unions, not harder. Not a radical idea. Here's another idea, not very radical. Some people will tell you on a 30-second ad that it's radical, but it ain't. How many of you know how many major countries on earth do not guarantee health care to all of their people? Smart guy right here. What is it? One. You got it. okay? So let me say a word. I can go on about 8 hours on this one. You ready for it? It's one I spend a lot of time on. You are living in a country which has a broken, cruel, and dysfunctional healthcare system. Now understand this. In America today, we are spending twice as much per person on healthcare as the people of other major nations. And somehow all of these other countries are able to provide healthcare to every man, woman, and child. We're spending over $12,000 per person on healthcare. The function of the American healthcare system today is not to provide quality care to all people. It is to make tens of billions in profits for the insurance companies. And that is why we have got to do in what other countries all over the world do. I live 50 miles away from the Canadian border. You get sick in Canada, you have a major operation, you end up 2 weeks in the hospital. You know what your bill is when you leave? Zero. And they're spending half as much per capita. We've got to pass a Medicare for all single-payer program. In a highly competitive global economy, we need to have the best educated workforce in the world. That means opening up the doors of higher education to all Americans, regardless of their income. Now, I am told, my opponents say, oh, Bernie, this is a radical idea. I hope all of you know that 50 years ago, you had major public colleges and universities, California, New York, probably Wisconsin, that were tuition free. Did you know that? Well, if we could do it 50 years ago, we could make public colleges and universities tuition free right now. And if Republicans can propose a $1.75 trillion tax break for billionaires, we could cancel all student debt in this country. In other words, what I want you all to be doing is not just, looking at the debates that's going on. Think big, not small. Look at what other countries are doing around the world and the gains they are making for working families. This is the greatest country on earth. We have a great history. There is no reason why we can't have free tuition at public colleges and universities. No reason why we can't have quality, affordable childcare. No reason why we can't lead the world in combating climate change and creating millions of good-paying jobs as we do that. I want you guys to be warriors against climate change and get paid well as we move towards sustainable energy and energy efficiency. We can do those things. These are not radical ideas. So let me, at the end of this long speech, come to the end. Don't go. All right. All right, I'll stay a few more hours. We'll have a good time. Look, what the establishment and the moneyed interests tell you in every day in a million different ways that sometimes we don't comprehend. What they are saying to you is you are powerless. We got all the power up there. We got all the money. You can't do a damn thing about it. We'll lower your wages. We'll take your plants to China. We'll buy elections. We'll give tax breaks to billionaires. You're irrelevant. You have no power at all. And here today, I'm ready behind. Here today, I'm here to tell you, take them on. Don't let these billionaires control our economy, our political system, our culture. I was never a great math student, but I did know this, that 99% is a larger number than 1%. So what this campaign and the broader political debate is about is whether or not Republicans will be successful in dividing us up by the color of our skin or where we were born or our sexual orientation, or our religion, or whatever it may be. We can divide us up. It's very easy to divide people up. I'm supposed to hate you, and you're supposed to hate her, and on it goes. That's one path. But the other path is bringing people together around an agenda that works for all of us, not just the few. So I would hope in the last 4 or 5 days of this campaign, you will do everything you can to elect Mandela to the Senate. I know Mandela, he's a very decent guy. Re-elect your governor, and let us revitalize American democracy and create a government and an economy that in this great country works for all, not just the few. That's our task. Let's go out and do it. Thank you all very much.